We are now recording.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to say that I'm fired. I'm getting old and we have new management. So I'm going to be quiet and take it away, new manager.
Okay, thank you. So let me start. Good afternoon, professors and students. We are Group 1, and our group members are Haesol Han, Eugene O, and me, Seung-Ak Lee. And we are going to talk and explain the contents about creating culture synergy, which is in chapter 4 in our CCC book, page 99 to 125. This is our table of contents. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the introduction and explain about the concepts of some words, which are cultural invisibility and cultural blindness. And Eugene will talk about culture synergy part. And finally, Haesol will talk about the way to deal with culture synergy. Okay, so this chapter examines and explains cultural invisibility and the cultural blindness that we have. Therefore, before starting this chapter, we must know the meaning of cultural invisibility and cultural blindness. Cultural invisibility, for example, is a broad meaning that a person recognizes that the culture A and the culture B are different, but it is not considered and is unified into one culture when doing something, and the other culture is invisible. The definition of a cultural blindness will be explained when describing how to manage cultural blindness.
Very important. Pay attention.
Okay. Because of the extent of these two definitions, this book could describe advantages and disadvantages of working in culturally diverse environments. And this book could also explain the present alternative strategies for managing and potentially benefiting from cultural diversity and its outcomes. For the concepts of cultural invisibility and cultural blindness to exist, we must understand the impact of cultural diversity on the organization. So this book chose Montreal in Quebec, Canada, to study cultural diversity. This book selected Montreal as an ideal location to study cultural diversity because Montreal has the largest English-speaking population in Quebec, a French-Canadian state, beyond the population with representatives from various cultures. After choosing Montreal, as you can see on the right graph, 2/3 of consultants said that they saw no impact on the consultant position as a result of investigating whether the cultural diversity had a positive or negative impact on the organization they worked with. The reason for these findings was that there were few people in Montreal who had a multiculturalism perspective at that time. Multiculturalism has continued to develop in Montreal. This slide in screen shows how multiculturalism has been developed in Montreal. In 1970s, less than 5% of management research published in the journals considered the notion of either international or domestic multiculturalism. In 1990s, articles about international and multicultural perspective begin to increase, but proportion still remains less than 10%. And after 1990, in the end of 20th century, finally multiculturalism has dramatically increased in Montreal. After increasing multiculturalism, the concept of cultural diversity became important. As the cultural diversity became important, the concept of cultural blindness, which sees the cultural diversity poorly, also became considered and had a great influence on the cultural diversity. Cultural blindness is a concept that is choosing not to see cultural differences. If this concept gets worse, it could limit our ability to benefit from diversity. So to effectively manage cultural blindness, our concentrated effort must be made to recognize cultural diversity without judging it. So after this, we are going to have a discussion with it, and we have two questions. First question is, as the concept of cultural blindness you heard before, what do you think of cultural blindness? And second question is there any situations or examples you know about cultural blindness? So this is a discussion question. So Professor, we're going to discuss now, but yeah.
You want me to take over and help with the discussion? Okay.
Yes, please.
So
yep.
This concept that we're talking about, the idea that they have is talking about how people recognize there are cultural differences. And I have told you how Chinese culture is different, how Canadian and American and German or Danish culture, they're different. So based on a book, you can understand it. But you still do not actually really experience it or fully understand it, because we have a natural ability, an SRC, self-reliance criterion, to just believe in what is normal for us. For example, in Korea, every student usually believes most marks come from your final exam at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do not work that way. And many students usually relax until the final exam, and then they study hard in the last week of class to try to get many marks. But our class, you can get 100 points from day one, or easily in the first few weeks. As soon as you present something, as soon as you contribute, you get those points. There are deadlines in our class, but you do not have to wait for the deadline. You can present today or tomorrow and get points for whatever that value is. So while some students sit in class and wait and watch, their marks are going by, and the chance of getting top marks gets harder and harder. If you present today, you will get marks today. If you're not happy with your marks, you have the chance to get more marks tomorrow or in the next class. The students today get 10 points for their weekly management today, plus they're presenting extra journal articles, so they get another point for that. So they have 11 points out of 100, versus every other student that is just sitting nicely and quietly and obediently, which is very polite in the Korean style. You have 0 points today out of 100 for today's activities. The sooner you try something, the sooner you take off your cultural blindness and see there are other ways possible, the sooner you may have better outcomes. So what I want you guys to do is to break up into breakout groups and discuss, or try to think of what is one more example of a cultural blindness that you've heard before. Or what do you think about cultural blindness? I want you to discuss that in a group, and your group needs to have one member at the end share the comment with the rest of the class. Are there any questions from the class yet?
I have a question.
Okay, I don't know. Charin, I think that's you talking. I didn't see your hand up, but yes, go ahead.
So the cultural blindness is just meaning that people are just ignoring the differences of culture and just believing like SRC, like just being.
Yes, kind of. What you said is absolutely correct, but it sounds a little bit negative. If I say somebody ignores something, it sounds like they're a SOB or they're a bad person. But SRC is not, it is bad, but it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you normal. Most people in the world, kind of like Donald Trump, you just see things your own way, and you don't see the advantage of a Chinese way. You don't see the advantage of a Korean way or a Danish way. And so if you don't see it and you don't look for it, you are blind to it. It's not that you're ignoring. The reality is you actually need to invest extra energy to get past your normal surrounding. We usually just see what's in front of us. We don't see the other ways. And if you go to another country, like even Jen's Graf, the professor from Denmark, he is a very high level professor in Denmark, and he is a government officer teaching about culture and teaching about how to do online education. But when he was teaching you, he told you to do things because we're all equal. Do things because you know, it's okay to make mistakes. And he said those things from a Danish view. And in some ways, maybe he was blind to the idea that many students in Korea actually have been hit before or yelled at before for making a small mistake. And because you get hit or yelled at, maybe you're afraid to try and make a mistake. Versus in Canada or USA or Denmark, it's actually good to try. So he was maybe a little bit culturally blind. So everybody is a little bit culturally blind until you put in more energy. Does that answer your question, Ms. Lee?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
thank you for asking that good question. You need to make sure, don't wait for me to give you the grade for your participation. You have access to these Excel files. You can put 1 point for that question today, and you have at least 1 out of 100 for today's question already. And the more you do that, the more points you get. Thank you. Is that clear? Anybody else before we go into breakout rooms? Everybody needs to join a group and then talk about what is cultural blindness, how can you overcome it, what do you need to do to get beyond your culture and actually start living a different culture style or working a different culture style. No questions? How about, I'm going to make 4 different groups, and here we go. How many minutes do you think you need? 7 minutes? Good enough?
Yes.
7 minutes it is. Good luck. Julian, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, you don't need to talk or anything. It's up to you.
No, okay.
Kunsu Kim, can you hear me? Okay, good, you're in. I hope you guys can still. Hope you guys can still hear me okay. I just wanted to say hear a few words from each group. So can we go through the group and the group member tell us what is the example or the comment that you found from your group? Who wants to volunteer and be international and proactive first?
Okay, so can I talk about our group discussion first? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so our group defines that firstly, the cultural blindness as the minorities to adapt to the dominant culture and not the other way around. And the examples that we have found is the two examples. First is in case of the teaching style in Korea, educators believe that traditional and instructional approaches of teaching style is only the right thing. Like, for example, as professor mentioned, Korean professors believe that students being obedient and quiet in the class is the best way in teaching style. But however, they ignore the advantages of the discussion style, which is in America or in other countries. So that's the first example. And second example is in the business sector, when the buyers and clients are from every different countries, but they treat customers in their own way, which is the seller way, do not respect or do not just research about the buyer's buyer's culture. So that's the two examples that we found.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Next, who's the next group that wants to proactively manage? I love that first example.
Can I volunteer?
You already are.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we have a little bit short time, so we only say about the question one, and my opinion is question one is I think it is very negative things because it can be very there's negative things both rich and poor countries. First, rich countries sometimes when they meet some people from poor country, they are sometimes ignore them and they think they are the best and better than. And the opposite part is I think this is more serious because the poor countries people sometimes think they are the best and their culture and their technology is the best. And then if they think like that, I think there's no opportunity to improve their skills anymore. So I think this is my opinion. And I think second question is, I couldn't say it in the Lithuanian, but I think an example is not the country, but I think the company name Nokia, because at the time before the smartphone came out, I think Nokia is one of the best company in the world for making cell phones, but they couldn't accept the technology era with smartphones. So I think they failed to make their business. So I think this is the example to second question.
Good. Thank you for that. Do we have another group ready to present? So I heard from Lee Soo-hyun's group, and I just heard from Lee Sung-hak. Was there one more group? Ali, who was the other group? Or did we already hear from all groups?
Can I volunteer my group?
Yes, you can. You're very proactive today, managing everything. Good.
To combine, I'll answer with combine of 1 and 2. People may know there are differences between each culture, but however, people are not able to catch differences. So, in such as business meeting, the people who hold meeting think their way is the way. So treat everyone equally, even though they are different culture. It was first example, and second example was sometimes parents require to child what they want to do because parents think only thing they want to do. That's the other way. That was our group's example.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, anybody that's not talked yet, do you have any comments about that? Anybody want to add something else?
Can I say something more? Just one sentence?
Sure.
And our group also discussed that cultural blindness ignores the cultural strength and that it pursues assimilation rather than the integration.
It pursues, what was it?
Assimilation.
Assimilation, okay.
Yeah,
yes,
rather than integration.
Great. One of the things that I heard, I believe it was Lee Sung-hak, he was talking about rich countries sometimes may have a negative view of poor countries, and they were talking about poor countries might be ignored, but I'm from Canada, and that's considered a rich country, and it's been a rich country my whole life. However, when I went traveling, for example, down to Miami, a lot of people in the United States would hear that, oh, I'm Canadian. Oh, what's it like to live in an igloo? I don't live in an igloo. I have a regular house. And what's it like to have polar bears on the way when you go to school? Or do you guys go to school? Do you guys actually have teachers and learn to read and write? So it's not just a stereotype type of thing. Cultural blindness, I think it's going to be explained quite a bit in this presentation. So the biggest thing is, it's not just about somebody else. A lot of time, cultural blindness is about ourselves. So what is it that we don't see we are doing when we see somebody else and maybe don't understand them or don't appreciate them? So cultural blindness is like an investment that you did not make yet. So what is something you could invest a little time or a little bit of energy and then better understand the other culture? So thanks for all of that. Han Haesol, your group has been managing the class so far. Would you like to continue talking about your presentation?
Okay.
Yes.
So okay, can you hear my voice? Okay,
Yes, I can.
So we have discussed about culture blindness and we talked about culture invisibility. But the concepts culture invisibility and culture blindness we described earlier are all things that happen because of cultural diversity. So only when cultural diversity exists, cultural invisibility and cultural blindness can exist. Therefore, we should learn about cultural diversity too. Cultural diversity means that culture is literally different. Each unique characteristics of culture is cultural diversity, as culture appears in various forms depending on different history and space. Depending on how people accept cultural diversity, it may have a positive or negative impact on us. But the essence of cultural diversity also has its own negatives or positives. On this slide, first, you will see the negative aspects of diversity. First problem that diversity most frequently causes is when the organization needs employees to think or to act in similar ways. Diversity most frequently causes problems in convergent process. Also, diversity renders communication and integration more difficult. People from different cultures may not understand each other. If an organization asks people with two different cultures to take care of one thing, it can cause confusion because of their work handling speed or different ideas they have. Let's look at situations where cultural diversity can have a negative impact. When managers and employees had to overgeneralize organization practice or cultures, diversity can cause problems. Also, when culturally diverse groups or organizations need to reach a single agreement, they can cause problems because there will probably be many disagreements. Lastly, when increasing the complexity and difficulty of developing company-wide policies procedures, it can cause problems too. As I said before, cultural diversity can cause many problems, and there are many things that organizations and companies need to care about. However, diversity, on the other hand, also gives many advantages and potential advantages. Firstly, the organization can expand its perspectives, strategy, tactics, or approach through diversity. Secondly, when diversity is well managed, we can benefit from both synergistic and culture-specific advantages. Diversity also offers benefits by including the ability of multicultural organizations to better understand customer need worldwide. Lastly, executives describe following benefits to their companies from diversity. Diversity can create positive situations that I'm going to talk about. Firstly, organizations can attempt to reposition the organization or strategy. Secondly, managers can use cultural diversity as resources. And lastly, companies can reap the benefits of cultural diversity in strategy alliance, joint venture, global projects, and other types of multinational business. So far, I have explained culture invisibility, culture blindness, and culture diversity's disadvantages and advantages. And next, Eugene will start to talk about the culture synergy part.
Okay. As before we talk about two aspects of cultural diversity, as we can see, that advantages of diversity is more highlighted than the negative effects. So that is why that we would like to discuss about how to manage cultural diversity well and change them into the synergistic organization. This graph is based on the research with 75 Canadian organizational development consultants and ask them to describe the positive and negative impacts of cultural diversity on their organizations. This graph is a schematic representation of their responses. There are 4 dimensions as you can see above. First, the no impact, which means no dimension. There's nothing there, and it means that cultural diversity has no impact on the organization. Yeah, Dr. Watts.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to help everybody else overcome their cultural blindness and just give an example. This slide that you have, it's very complex, it's very important, and I'm guessing many people might not understand what it means. So invest in yourself, invest in cultural diversity and synergy, ask a question, get involved. Don't follow the Korean cultural norm of just waiting for something to be explained. You should get extra benefits if you ask. For example, if you don't understand this, we just finished hearing that if you have no impact, if you don't do anything, there's maybe no big impact, but you can lose a lot by not doing anything. And one of the things this is saying is you can gain a lot by trying the new style. So please try the new style. Ask questions, be proactive. We don't have to just sit quietly. But Eugenio, you're doing a great job teaching. Please continue.
Yeah. If you have any questions to this graph, so feel free to ask everything in this content. So I will continue. That most has considered the first one. That most has considered a non-existence as having no impact whatsoever. Some had considered that it is primarily negative, which means cultural diversity only causes problems for organization. And only a very few answered that cultural diversity either causes problems or leads to advantages for organization. But the important thing is that they do not think that both will happen simultaneously. And then focus on the most right graph that both positive and negative impact that cultural diversity simultaneously causes problems and leads to advantages for organization. And managers' ability to recognize cultural diversity and its potential advantages and disadvantages defines an organization's approach to managing diversity. We can divide these approach into 3, parochial, ethnocentric, and synergistic. You know that we also learned this in previous class, right? And simply, parochial is a type of organization's approach that think our way is the only way. Therefore, organizations which implement parochial approach do not consider concept of cultural diversity because they think that the only way they know is all. and therefore they think cultural diversity has no impact on the organization, and they tend to ignore differences. So when problem arises, they will not attribute it to the culture. This means that they did not think that about the possibility of cultural differences and just go their way. And this is the most common response to cultural diversity. Next, this is a style of the ethnocentric organizational approach, and it is the concept that suggests that our way is the best way. Please remember that when parochial think that our way is the only way, which do not consider other culture, then this approach is that they recognize about the cultural diversity, but ethnocentric approach regards the cultural diversity as a negative impact, which means it will cause problems. Therefore, how do they think about the impact of the cultural diversity? They will minimize differences to avoid problems. With selecting a monocultural workforce, and progress may be single culture to reject crush among cultures. Therefore, in this approach, cultural diversity is considered proportional to the possibility of problem arising, and organizations view all other ways inferior, so they will miss advantages from the cultural diversity. This is not as much common as the parochial, but still, it is common type of the organizational management. And I just come up with information about the Japanese ethnocentric organization, that Japan has some of the industries in Japan has some characteristics, namely very low levels of the workforce diversity and high distinctiveness of the headquarters employment practices. As ethnocentric company having dominating headquarters staffed with home country nationals and managing overseas subsidiaries, and as some research that through hiring of foreign fresh university graduates, for instance, a Japanese company tried to revise this strategy to be changed. Okay, please go to the next slide. And finally, this is the synergistic approach, which is very uncommon, that the combination of our way and their way may be the best way. In aspect of synergistic, please remember that they do not emphasize only positive impacts of cultural diversity. They also think that cultural diversity can simultaneously lead to problems and advantages for the organization. Also in management, they train organization members to recognize cultural differences and use them to create advantages for the organization. Of course, as I emphasized before, there may be some problems as we talk about the disadvantages and advantages, right? But they will receive many advantages from cultural diversity, which is realized and recognized. And again, this is still very uncommon aspect. So that is why we're discussing about this cultural synergy and possibilities of this aspect. And do you have any questions that I said before, or can I just move on?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Can I ask about the parochial, dimension? About the parochial, you said that they don't really recognize the diversity. So I was just comparing with the dimension, the 4 dimensions that you showed us. And is this that no impact, or is that it does not just fit into any dimension?
So your question is that parochial means that they ignore the differences of the culture. So how does it impact or not?
I mean, like, I see that ethnocentric is the single unpolar dimension, and synergistic is the 2 unipolar dimensions. And I was not sure about the parochial, because it has no impact. But if you said that parochial is about not just they ignore the diversity, and they just do not recognize the diversity. So I was
maybe I can
about,
help answer that question if you like. Can I be a good student in class?
Yeah.
Thank you, teacher. There are generally 3 levels of experience. Everybody is born parochial. And so you're born and you only know one way. You do not know there's any other way. So it's not necessarily ignoring the other way. You just don't know any other countries exist. You don't know the Chinese or the Japanese or the German way or the African way exists. So you don't have synergy, you don't have benefits because you just don't even think about it. Eventually, you go and you get a little bit of education and you become better, so you know there are other ways, but you're still ethnocentric. You're only thinking around what is me is normal, and I know there is another way, but I don't understand their advantages. I don't understand why they do these strange things. So I don't get the advantages of the other way. And eventually, if you invest your time and energy to try to understand the other culture, and you really try hard to understand why do they do it that strange way, what is the possible advantage, eventually you will learn the other possible advantage. And then you have the impacts, but only after you get investment and then you have the synergy together. Let me give you an example. Many people in North America and around the world, and possibly in Korea, when you think of any group of people, you usually have a stereotype. And the stereotype can be good or it can be bad. A bad thing is if you don't check it. But a good thing is it helps you understand a little bit about it. And for example, a stereotype of Chinese is that Chinese are their products are usually cheaper. And some people think because they're cheaper, they might not be good. Well, that has some truth to it. Traditionally, Chinese companies, Chinese suppliers will only charge something like 1/2 of 1 penny or 1/2 of 1 won profit on every product or service they sell. So it's very, very low. So the buyer, the customer, basically gets the product at a very, very low price. And in North America, for example, if you buy a pen made in China, sometimes it can be a gold pen, but you're only paying for the cost of the materials plus 1/2 of 1 cent profit to the Chinese manager. And then the American company in New York might charge $10 for his profit when he sells the pen. And they will think that usually the Chinese product, because they only have 1/2 of 1%, they're cheap. They're not very good. The problem is they don't realize that Chinese pen company, because he has the lowest price, he can supply every pen company in every school and every office on the planet. And because he has millions of customers, even though they sell a small amount of profit from each one, he gets a lot when it's all together. But the New York pen seller that charges 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 times profit when he sells it for $10 or $100 for 1 pen, that one company only has 1 supplier and only 1 or 2 customers. It's very easy for the New York customer to go bankrupt. But the Chinese company, because every major school uses him and every major pen store uses him, it's almost impossible for him to go bankrupt. Understand? Most people initially think low-priced products might be cheap, and they don't realize when you sell many, 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 your business is actually much safer. So that is an example of cultural blindness until you realize the advantages. Is that clear to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I talk too much. I'll let the teachers continue.
Okay. And yeah, I would like to introduce examples of cultural synergy that Samsung has that about hybrid management system. And I already sent.
Made in Korea, right?
Yeah, right. And I already sent an article to every student in this class, and I'm sure that you read about this. And pay attention that this red color text is a traditional way of management commonly used in Japan. And the blue color text is the other culture's management strategy from United States. As you can see in the red one, that long-term corporate supplier relationships, but the other cultures in the United States but with some level of competition, annual recruitment for entire level positions, but they also have open recruitment for the experienced specialist, and they also have the internal and external capital markets. And I have a question that think about that if Samsung is parochial or ethnocentric in building up this hybrid management system, that does this hybrid management system is possible? It maybe not, because this is the synergistic aspect that considered the combination of our way and their way may be the best way. In addition, Samsung bring outsiders in and sending insiders out, which means that Korea, for instance, that Korean Samsung workers go out and work in other culture, and other culture workers from Samsung come to Korea, and this could be also synergy of cultural differences. Finally, global strategy group is also regarded as the synergistic solutions from Samsung, and that it encouraged global partner strategy through developing and leading as global companies. They tried to have foreigners spend 2 years learning Korean, for instance, and they analyzed other reasons using synergistic organization strategy. Through using this aspect, Samsung can compete outside in its home markets and improve their ability to compete with some industry either. And
Can I ask a question? Kyosunim?
Yeah.
What do you guys think of this statement? I'm not going to say it's my idea. I'm just going to say a statement. You just said that Samsung may be good because they send Korean people out to help in other areas, and they bring other foreigners into Korea to help with Samsung for a while. However, if you look closely, most of the foreigners that come into Samsung only stay for 1 or 2 years for Samsung to take some new idea, and then they send the other person away and they try to get somebody else. What I am implying is that Samsung management is still Korean, and they're trying to learn 1 or 2 tricks from a foreigner, but they think that the Korean way is still best. Is it possible that Samsung is ethnocentric and knows that there's other ways, and they're just trying to get a foreigner to come and show us possibly how to do sales in your country, but still the Korean way is best? That's why we only need you for 1 year or 2 years?
I think that when I focused on the Samsung's hybrid management system that I had this on the PPT, that its aspect is just access of the synergistic approach, I think. But as Dr. Watts says, that Samsung also has the Korean culture like management. They also have this, and this can be considered as the ethnocentric, I think. But in case of this hybrid management system, this is the access of the synergistic, and I think that Samsung also, like in some other strategies, they also have ethnocentric aspect, I think. So it needs to be, so this could be the one example that Samsung's approach to the hybrid management system using a synergistic approach, I think.
So everybody loves Samsung. We are making a video. The video is going online. We want to make sure it's clear. We love Samsung, 대한민국, yes. And especially because our visiting professors, the executives are working with us, we definitely love them. It's just something to think about. Many people try to be synergistic, but do they really get beyond their own way being the best? And I think it might be a little bit interesting to think you have an article later about the paradox of Samsung's rise. When you talk about that, keep this in mind. Overall, I'm not saying Samsung's bad. Samsung's awesome, of course. So let's continue. We have to say good things in case we want to keep our job in Samsung. Keep going, Professor Wu.
Yeah, and next slide.
Cultural synergy as an approach to managing the impact of cultural diversity involves a process in which managers form organizational strategies, structures, and practices based on cultural patterns. It will create new forms of new management and organization that transcend culture. Therefore, in cultural synergy approach, the first commonly held assumption is called homogeneity, the belief that all people are basically the same. This is very common assumption, especially in United States in the melting pot myth. And this means that people with diverse culture mix to create a homogeneous culture. So it would like to consider that all people are basically in the similar or the same culture. By contrast, the heterogeneity is the synergy assumption that we are not all the same, like Canadian refer to as a cultural mosaic. Actually, as we know, that synergy is based on the assumption that various within social differ, then where does this cultural synergy is based on? It is, of course, heterogeneity. And rather than assuming similarities, cultural synergy assumes that similarities and differences share equal importance, which makes that it is possible to have positive and negative effects simultaneously, but it will take its own advantages from respecting cultural diversity. As we can see in the cultural mosaic in Canada, heterogeneity will be openly expressing and welcomely accepting the expression of cultural diversity and acknowledging the depth of the group's cultural diversity. Then finally, let me explain one survey that 145 executives from around the world. 83% of them answered that they preferred the synergy approach. But did it really reflect on the real society? But unfortunately, only a third described that their organization has using synergistic approach in real. Then how can they improve their approach as synergistic in their organization? Hazel will continue with discussing problem solving and creating cultural synergy.
Firstly, thank you for waiting a long time. I'll continue about how can we deal with cultural synergy. First of all, there are some features in synergistic organizations. They reflect the best aspects of all members' cultures in their strategy, structure, and process without violating the norms of any single culture. The people in the group regularly use diversity as a key resource in solving problems. In fact, conflict might arise because each culture views the situation exclusively from its own perspective. Across cultures, people's divergent values, perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors magnify the challenges faced in understanding and resolving organizational problems. So, there are steps to solve cultural synergistic problem. It is important to recognize problem situation, and conflict may develop even when it doesn't make sense from their own cultural perspective. We should remember that describing situation from each culture's perspective, not just from their own perspective. In addition, we should refrain from interpreting or evaluating the situation. The second process is culturally interpreting the situation. Whereas a single cultural perspective limits managers' flexibility in global situations, multiple perspectives enhance their understanding and options. So, this step involves identifying and interpreting the similarities and differences in thoughts, feelings, and actions among the cultures involved. The third step is increasing cultural activity. Organizations create synergistic alternatives by searching for culturally appropriate ways to solve problems involving from multiple cultures. They should be compatible with the assumptions of all represented cultures. That's why culturally synergistic solutions are novel and transcend the behavioral patterns of each individual's culture. Lastly, organizations must plan the implementation of culturally synergistic solutions carefully and implement it while observing cultural reaction. Before organization members will understand the need for changes based on synergistic problem solving, they must develop cultural self-awareness. Through cultural understanding, the organization can solve its problems and implement the changes needed to foster high-quality client service, employee effectiveness, and job satisfaction. Also, based on multicultural feedback, refining the solution is important too. Moving on, here is an example of this process which actually happened in the hospital in US, California. There were male doctor from Uruguay and female nurse from Philippines. The nurse was improperly using a particular machine to treat a patient. So the doctor instructed the nurse on the proper procedure and asked if she understood, and she affirmed understanding. However, 2 hours later, the patient's condition deteriorated because the nurse had continued to administer the treatment improperly. To interpret the situation, the doctor was older and nurse was younger. He was doctor and she was nurse. Culturally, he expected the nurse to say whether she understood instruction and ask a question about it, which is open communication. However, she couldn't tell the doctor that she didn't understand without implying that he had given her poor instructions, and it'll make him to lose faith. So the suggestion they found was, upon giving initial instructions, the doctor was to ask the nurse to describe the procedure that she would follow. Then, as the doctor listened, he could assess the accuracy of the nurse's understanding and identify areas that needed further explanation. As a result, it makes the hospital could achieve the delivery of excellent medical care without violating the norms of either culture. And here, I want to hear, are there any new solution that you want to suggest? Anyone?
Please, some other classmates. What do we have?
Are there any solutions?
Han Hei Sol and your group and Miss Yu, you are the professor. Can you make your students active in class?
Because of time, can I say my opinion, my solution?
You can, but that is the Korean way. You are Korean and you have students. You asked your students to give a solution, but because they're Korean, they're not saying anything. If you're Korean, you just tell them the answer. Can you overcome your cultural blindness and find a way to get your students to be synergistic? How can you get your students to talk? It's hard, huh? Icharin, you usually have no problem giving some suggestions. What do you think? Can Han Hei Sol or Miss Eugene O, Sungak Lee, can you repeat the question?
Okay.
When you give the question directly at a student, it's easier to get a result in Korea. So Icharin, she might answer your question if you repeat the question.
There were problems in the communication between Uruguay doctor and Filipino nurse. So the patients get problems. So are there any solution to get over this problem? Miscommunication.
To identify the problem, I think the first step is to, I think the action of the nurse was kind of culturally blinded, because although she did not understand the instructions exactly, she just affirmed that she understood. So if she knew that in the culture of the doctor that she did not understand something, that she should ask question, then I think the problem would kind of solve better. But because the nurse was kind of culturally blinded, I think the problem happened.
Thank you for your participation.
Is the nurse, rather than saying she's Filipino, what if we say the nurse is Korean? Isn't it the same thing in Korea? You should not tell your teacher if you don't understand?
I think it's the same.
Yeah, it's similar.
Lee Sung-hak, you're the Kyosanim. You're not supposed to be answering the question. That's cheating. What about Lee Soo-hyun or Kim Min-jae? Na Yu-jung. Can you guys understand how does that happen a lot, or is there a solution for that?
I also think this is the problem because of the cultural blindness. Actually, I have not thought about a solution for particular the nursing situation. But like, can I just say what I've thought for to solve the problem of cultural blindness in just like in business sector or in just another situation?
Sure. But I have to be quiet. I'm not the teacher. Ask the teacher.
Okay. Can I
Of course.
okay. I see this situation really common in this global society and also in business sector as I'm majoring in international business. So cultural diversity is that we need to respect, and one that I thought of is celebrating traditional holidays and festivals can be the one way, because celebrating diversity can help increase cultural literacy, the awareness and acceptance, and start by including the holidays and festivals of the cultures in your company or to news to the bulletin can make the work can be, I think, more recognizable of their cultures. And I see that like Google or other multinational cultures adapt this kind of program, like the cultural programs or the events to understand more better. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you. And then I'll continue my presentation. Then, are there any tip to create cultural synergy? As shown in the figure, there are 5 strategic options to choose from in selecting their approach to multicultural situations. In all cross-cultural situations, managers must create a balance between continuing to work in their own way and adapting to the ways of other cultures. Exhibiting maximum flexibility and sensitivity, highly effective global managers use all 5 strategic options and selecting a specific option depending on the particular situation and people involved. I'll explain about it through the example too. Let's assume there are business meeting between Japanese company and Korean company. At their Korean company insisted to use Korean can be an example of cultural dominance. Mostly the companies which have more power than counterparts have used this approach. On the other side, cultural accommodation can be a situation that Japan immediately agree about using Korean. It is pretty opposite of cultural dominance. It attempts to imitate the practices of their international colleagues and blend into the local culture. Then, how about when they act as if no conflict exists and trying to saving face? It is cultural avoidance. It is used when the unresolved issue is less important than maintaining the long-term business relationship or contract. Moving on, cultural compromise, which located at the middle of them, each side chose to speak in its own language and use interpreters. So we can see it as combination of cultural dominance and cultural accommodation. So it implies that both sides concede something in order to work more successfully together. Then when the cultural synergy will be emerged. For instance, the answer will be both sides choose to communicate in English because it is considered as international language, so it allows multiple cultures to conduct business without one side capitulating and becoming disadvantaged by speakers the other's language. By creating cultural synergy, it can develop new solutions against problems that liberate the cultural differences among all cultures involved. Also, solutions will always go beyond what would be needed in a purely domestic situation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our presentation, and these are our references. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
If any Korean students have any questions. Now that they know, you could graduate my class just as soon as you want. As soon as you submit materials, you get the points. Nobody even wants marks from me. I'm trying to give them away and I can't give it away. How about I give you another example? There is no final exam in this course. There's no deadline in this course. The sooner you do something, the sooner you get the marks and you graduate. Now let me give you a different example. I think all of you were born in the 1980s, I hope, or close to then. Anyway, in the 1980s, Korea was growing almost the fastest it ever grew. And we had Korean Airlines. Korean Airlines was flying around the world. But the Korean management style that is still popular today is based on seniority. You have to respect your teacher. You need to respect me. But it was serious. It's bad. I'm not telling you don't respect me, but with Korean Airlines, the pilots, the senior pilots, were the teachers. And they had their students as junior pilots sitting behind them. And the junior pilots would learn just by watching the senior pilots. But a problem was, when you fly to Canada, for example, sometimes it takes 18 hours of flying, and the pilots get tired. And the senior pilots fell asleep. And when the plane started to go down, it actually crashed into buildings or crashed into mountains, even though all of the customers on the plane and the junior student pilots were there, and their eyes were huge, saying, oh my God, should I wake him up? No, you wake him up. No, you wake him up. Because they thought that maybe it's a test. Maybe the teacher knows what he's doing. He never makes a mistake. They stayed quiet, and the black box in the plane recorded this many, many times. Planes from Korean Airlines crashed and people died just because they were afraid to ask a question. Please don't make that mistake in my class. You can graduate the class as soon as you try. Nobody's going to die. Is there anybody in class that heard that before? Do you guys think I'm joking? No comments. Okay, let's get back to the class again. I just wanted to remind you guys, Han Hae Sol, I'm going to thank you first of all because you were the one that you were the representative for your group. Maybe what was it, Lee Sung-hak or Eugene? Maybe they did all the work and you did nothing, Miss Han, except post things in Facebook. I don't know, but because you did post it, I see you did something, and so you get the most attention from me. That is a reality almost everywhere around the world. And so I encourage everybody to try posting something in Facebook. You get benefit. But because I'm generous, Lee Sung-hak, you still get perfect points. You have 10 points for presenting your topic today. Do you deserve any more? Eugene, do you want any more than 10 points today? I don't know. I'm too shy to talk. Imagine Donald Trump. He would say, give me 100 points. Come on, be bold, try. Let me help you. There is a reason I should give you more points today. Figure it out. Why? Hong Min, can you think, why should you give them more points? They managed the topic, which means just talk about the textbook article. But did they do anything else?
They used examples, and also they described their thoughts, their opinion in the PPT. So that is also another reason.
But one thing I'm trying to teach you is, do you care about just thoughts and ideas? What is true? What is reliable? Everything usually has good points and bad points. Maybe Miss Han and Mr. Lee and Miss O, what's the polite way to say, maybe they're full of shit. Do they have proof? Is their information reliable? She's saying yes. How do we know?
I think they used reference under the picture or the examples.
Okay, maybe they just referenced, I think they're just referencing some drunk guy on the sidewalk. Anybody else?
I think she's good at I think she's good at leading the discussion from students because she gave a question about her slide, as I remember, and she gave a concrete answer to your question, and that's why she deserved to get more points.
But isn't that just managing the topic? Maybe they just read the textbook, like everybody's supposed to read the textbook, and if you talk about the textbook chapter, you can get 10 points. So I gave them maximum points for doing that. What I'm asking you is, can you think outside of a regular student in Korea, and can you see a way that you might get more points? Usually Korean students wait until the professor gives you points. I'm telling you now, there is another way you can get more points. This group and you, anybody here, can get more points now. Mr. Lee,
Right, yes.
Ms. Olo, and Ms. Han, they have done something different. It's worth more points, but they haven't really asked for it. I don't need to give it to them if they want. If they just want, okay, you get 10 points. Good job. Nice job. See you later. See you next week.
I think they asked our opinions.
Isn't that normal when you discuss any class topic?
No,
They're-
not in Korean style.
Okay, you're right. In Korean style, they don't care. They just say, here's the rule. Here's the way it is, yes? But that is just teaching the chapter topic. So that's the weekly topic. Did they do anything extra? What is the normal way you can get points in our class?
Can I say, or just give other students chance to take a guess?
If you say you're doing the Korean way,
Yeah, that is why I'm hesitating.
can you try to be an international professor and get your Korean students to try to be international?
Yeah.
How can you help them?
Oh, how can I motivate students?
Especially when every student thinks, where's my baseball bat? If you talk in class, I'm gonna hit you. Here's my ruler. Yeah.
I think
Booyah!
I
Go
think
ahead,
they use
Lucy.
Samsung case, like connecting with the final research paper.
Okay.
They use the Samsung case.
What's that?
Connecting with the final research paper topic.
Okay, can you show me more? Do they deserve something? Did they connect to any research? Or did they just read
Yes.
the textbook?
They
Can they
used
prove it?
some articles about the paradox of Samsung.
What did they say?
They compared the old style, which is Korean style, and another country style about recruitment or the human resourcing.
Okay, so let me, okay. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm going to share my screen and just show you what you were talking about. So this is an article that the students were talking about. I don't remember they shared this picture, but this is an article. And who is it by? Who wrote it? Is it a good journal?
Yes, Harvard Business Review.
Harvard sucks. Kim Young's better. But yeah, it's not bad. So this is a Scopus Journal article. It's bad because at the end of this paper, look how they finish the paper. The very last page, what do they have? Where's the conclusion? No conclusion and no references. So anything in here, if you don't believe it, you can't easily check. That's why Harvard's not perfect. Most Scopus Journal articles you have, and in your papers, you must have the references showing where you got it from. But the other thing that is very good is right here. Did you guys talk a lot about this?
Yeah, yeah.
What is this saying? Did you guys share this with the class?
Like in the PPT that I wrote a red text in the traditional Japanese system, and I explained that blue text is from the Western system, and I just write in text, not just paste this graph.
Yes, so this is saying that Samsung's style is actually created initially from the Japanese and some from the Western. So if you actually do some more research, some people say that Samsung is more Japanese than it is Korean. I don't want anybody to bomb my house or bomb my office. I'm just saying some research says that. But the point is, yes, they shared this information and they shared these journal articles. So what? Is this worth more points? Should I give Miss O and Miss Han and Mr. Lee some more points for this? How many? Oops. I don't hear anybody talking. I will just assume, yes, because you shared this article and several other articles, by sharing articles, you get extra points. So this is at least one more point. So you add to your marks. Anyone else, any student, if you share an article like this, you can get points. We just discussed why it's good, why it's interesting. Maybe you can argue it. Maybe it's good that you can reference. It's from a reliable journal. So whether it's good or not, you can get points for this. So is there anybody else in class that has any article that you want to share? If you share it today, you get points today. If you share something else next week, you get points next week. Lee Soo-hyun, are you presenting anything today? Ha Xian, are you interested in sharing any article today? Can I please give you more points today? I want to give you points. I want to give marks away. What about Yoo-jung? Are you there? Or Sukrita? I didn't hear from you at all today. Do any of you have an article to share? I'll count the 5 and then we lose the opportunity. Look at that. Miss Han, she's so confident that she got so many marks. Did you see that? She's drinking vodka in the middle of her presentation. Way to go. Awesome.
Eating just water. Eating just water.
Yeah. Sure. It's okay. As long as you have good results, that's okay. So let's get back, and we are basically finished the class. There are some presentations that you guys, obviously, I'm going to share. Yeah, you guys see the presentations from the other group, and I have also shared online. There is the presentation about cultural synergy you can take a look at if you want more information. There are several more articles online. This group, that article that we just talked about, that is in the folder I already shared with you, the student optional reference material folder. There's many more like this. Just finding one of those and sharing it with the class, you get points. And I am encouraging you all, we started the semester getting into the Excel file. Several students in several classes had some of your work overwritten. And so I have broken the file into 3 different groups. So our class now has our own Excel file just for us. And if each group has only one person talking or using that Excel file, there should be no problem saving the information and recording your marks. So if you go into, can you guys see my my paper? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
If you go into here, this is your weekly topics. So in CCC week 4, there's here's one of your articles. It has a confusing name. I will change this later. Another article you shared was the cultural mosaic beliefs. Another one that we're talking about is the concept of cultural synergy. That's a great article related to this topic. So those are the articles you guys shared with the class. Great. Now, if we go out a little bit more, if you go a little bit more, every student has access to this. And in our student optional reference information, there's hundreds more articles. You can use this for your research paper and use this to plan to make you look good when you talk to a company. By now, all of you have some research. You should be able to ask very good world famous questions to the companies. You should be getting ready to talk to them soon. Where is it here? Achieving success through social capitals here. Asian management in the 21st century, that's here. The idea of the paradox of Samsung's rise should be somewhere in here. Well, I won't take too much of your time, but the paradox of the rise of Samsung, that's in here. And the last thing I want to show you is whenever you find anything, you go into your class folder. All of you have access to this. And inside your folder, now you have your own private CCC class information. If you open this, you can put a link to your article here. And when you do that, write down your point. Many of these students might not realize that I am not just going to give marks away completely by myself. I hope you guys practice your own management and put your marks in here. I'm keeping a lot of records. You know, Ali and Julian are keeping a lot of records. Here it comes. It should be coming up. Let me try to open this and show you. Class is over. I'm just showing you that, here it is, it's working now. From September 25th, from today onwards, we are using this file for the PPT and the sharing of information and recording the marks. So your marks are now in the CCC attendance, which is working really, really slowly. So here you go, right at the top. Jungyu Jin and Yi Charin, you were talking today. All of you guys were talking today. Should you be getting points? Should you be writing points in here? Can somebody go in, open this, and write down your points? Hopefully, we have only one person from each group accessing. If everybody in the class goes in at the same time, it might crash. It might not save things easily. But if one person from group goes in, you all get marks. That's it. I'm finished for the day. Thank you very much. I hope you guys are starting to appreciate this cultural synergy and how you can communicate beyond cultural boundaries. Miss Hong, any questions from you? Or Jiwoo Byun, any questions from you?
Professor,
Min Hong, you started to ask questions or talk today.
No.
Is there anything else that you would like to share? Or can I give you points for any reason?
Oh, no.
I can't even give points away. Okay. Have a good day. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
thank you, professors. You have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Don't forget, the 7th week of class is when everybody should be showing their articles and what they have for their term paper. That's worth another 5 marks. The deadline is the 7th week, the end of the 7th week. So
Okay.
make sure you're preparing to do it. one thing I hope to see not only is the journal articles, but I hope to see you have plans to survey companies. Or since we have a holiday this week, maybe you start surveying your relatives or friends or company members and develop your guangxi, develop your connections with your target companies during the holiday. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Professor.
Thank you.
Bye, Professor.
Any other
Professor,
questions? Yes, Ms. Ha.
yeah, one of my relative is working for Samsung, and can I use the interview with him in our proposal paper?
Of course. You honestly, you can interview a drunk guy in the street. You can interview your dog. The more you show, our class is talking about communication. So everybody knows that information coming out of your mouth, there's some good things and bad things. So some people will believe you, some people will not believe you. But if you show information from anybody else, that's more reason to believe you. So anybody you interview will make you more believable. If you say they are from Samsung, that sounds good. I can't check easily. You could say your brother is the CEO of Samsung, and maybe it's true. So yeah, that would be good. But what I encourage you, you are very proactive in class, but are you getting the international benefit? Because when you ask the question to your cousin, why don't you ask the same question to anybody else in LinkedIn connected to Samsung? Or though there's 3 executives, high executives of Samsung, they want to talk. They're waiting for students to ask them questions. So if you just get a couple other students together and say, we're interested in Samsung, they will hold a Zoom meeting with you and answer any questions you have. They're waiting.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good day.